Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Nate's Garage and Bakery. It's been a little bit of a while since I put the last video out, and let me tell you, putting this video together, I remember now, because I forgot before I rewatched this footage, how much, first of all, that this kit has gone together so smoothly until I got to this stupid hot end. There are so many small parts to fiddle around with. I had to fabricable, if you will, some junk together so that it would fit. Let me tell you, not for the weak of heart. So I hope you have patience and some tools of your own to get done what I had to do in order to get this sucker together as you see it here, and basically as it was meant to be put together. Sorry for the long intro. Let's get the hell on with it, shall we? Alright, we're going to put our hotbed together on this sucker. This being our hotbed, this being where we mount it. There is no mention, at least not at this point in the instruction manual, on which way this should face, so I'm going to put it towards the back end. This is going to go on here like this, with 4 screws and springs. The little hardware kit that came with binder clips and stuff has the springs and the screws for this. So the little screws here, 4 of them, and the 4 springs, and the 4 hand nuts, as they say in Chinglish. These little thumb screws, thumb nuts, I don't know. You thumb your nuts, yeah. So, all there is to this is that you get a screw and a spring. And you put the screw, you see these are all nice and wallowed out there. You put the screw in there so they don't interfere with anything on the bed. You put the spring, you put that there, and you shake it all about. Do the hokey pokey, etc. And then these little hand thumb screws, I don't know why they decided to make these thumb screws. Other than that, it makes it easier to adjust them, I suppose, in the case of whatever I'm seeing now. The problem that I believe I've heard about. So the problem that I have heard about online and such, people, would give a 1-star rating because, oh, stupid screws hit the damn sometimes you gotta deal with it. You see how this hits the little piece right there? Well, that's what people are complaining about. So basically, these thumb screws need to be in such an orientation so that they don't hit the damn thing. Okay? It'll slide right past it at that point. And I'm right here. Yeah, slide right past that little piece here that holds the rods in place. That goes for both sides. And I'm going to go ahead and imagine that it's the same deal on the back side with the back mounts back here. So that's in place. Let's go ahead and flip this around. And yes, same interference fit. So you need to make sure basically that these thumb screws are turned this way so they don't hit this thing. Not that big of a deal if you ask me. And if you're really pissed off about it, go find some M3 nuts. Chances are there's enough extra in here that you can use the stuff that they gave you and use those instead down here. It'll just be a little tougher to adjust the height of your thing, which you can do with a screwdriver right here. Coming together. Hell yeah! There's our Omquan sensor. I'm kind of coercing this to come down here. And basically that sensor will turn on when it gets some distance away from this metal bed, and therefore tell the controller that, hey, that bed's there, or, you know, whatever it actually says. I'm sure it doesn't actually say a word. It says a bit. Nerd humor. Now, the deal with this auto-leveling sensor thing here is if you don't get the kit with that auto-leveling sensor, then it's basically up to you to level this bed completely by hand with these screws. Now, getting the auto-leveling bed system, it allows you to mostly get this level. You can eyeball it more or less. You can measure it down to whatever you want to measure it to. And then this takes care of the rest. I think it actually might take a couple of samples here and there on the bed, and then you will actually see, and there's a video on the DVD, and again, these videos are, you know, universal language of hand gestures. They show the guy actually, you know, adjusting the thing to where, you know, he points to the thing and then he points as the thing's moving across on the x-axis. You'll see this little thing, not that little thing. You'll see these little things adjusting back and forth to account for the bed tilt that it perceives. So that's what the auto bed leveling is. You can get these for less if you don't get that option. I figured, why not? Then you don't have to mess with the stupid manual whatevers. One of the other reasons I got this particular one is because of this extruded aluminum frame. Some of the other HICTOP units, I believe, just have rods and then like an acrylic piece up here that it attaches to. It just didn't look as sturdy to me as this one does. This thing is on, baby. This is a sturdy little sucker. That is, hell yeah. I mean, I'm not going to put all my oomph into it, but I ain't going nowhere. And like I said, even if, that's the other thing I liked about this, is that you have extra attachment points here with the extruded aluminum. If I wanted to add some braces, to, from the corners to the top, just to further make that rigid, which, it's pretty damn rigid the way it is, but I understand a lot of flying around and this and that might juke around some stuff, but yeah. That pretty much brings us through step 55 of the instructions on this particular printer, if you're following along with this exact printer, or whatever. The next section here is the extruder assembly, the extruder being that which extrudes the plastic through the hot tip and splooges it out on the actual print. Blah, 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 blah. I'm going to guess we're going to need this at some point, that being the extruder, the hot end, and the extruder itself actually would be the motor we're going to mount here that sucks the plastic down in there and jams it in there so it can get melted and splooged out. The instructions here say, attention, make sure the V bearing can stick on the filament gear under the pressure of spring, capitalized spring. I don't know what the... Make sure the V bearing can stick on the filament gear under the pressure of spring. I'm not quite sure exactly what the hell that means. This particular parts bag here has got a bunch of stuff in it, and I believe it's probably for a couple of... It could be just a kit for the hot end here. There's a bearing. And we've got a little heat sink here, which looks like they drilled a hole through after the fact, because you can see these fins are all bent to hell, but that's alright. It's a heat sink. It's not really hurting the performance of it to have things like this fin here bent all jacked up and everything. In fact, I just broke it off, so no big deal. It gives whatever you're mounting it to a bunch more surface area to get rid of the heat that it's trying to get rid of. Basically, it's a heat sink. It's sinking heat into this so that it can get rid of it in the air. Anyway, so there's a fan shroud. And I'm not sure what exactly that is, but yeah, then we've got a little, this is where we're going to mount. Oh, actually, no, I don't know what that is right off the top of my head. Well, we're going to figure it out, though. Now, some of the other stuff in here is, like this spring. I'm guessing that's the spring they're talking about. The pressure of the spring. And some mounting screws here, which I'll set aside. Now, this is what we're going to mount to the motor itself. You can see it has little teeth on there. And that's going to grab onto the filament and drag it along with those teeth. So I'm guessing that whatever they mean there has something to do with making sure, yeah, whatever. We'll see when we put it together. How about that? Number 2 on the attenzione here, make sure the filament can be inserted from feed port into throat nozzle. Otherwise, it will cause extruding filament abnormally. Or don't extrude filament. Basically, do it right or it's not going to work. I think is pretty much the gist of that. What we got here? Step 56 is to mount this little bar right here to our platform here using an M6, 8 of them. Well, at least at some point we'll use 8 of them. M6, really? M6 by 8, 1 piece. Okay. I'm gonna have to, well, I don't know, that's not really an M6 now, is it? But does it fit? That could be a typo. There's an M5. We do have M5 by 8s that are shorter, but this came in this kit, and we do need 1 piece. I'm going to go ahead and use this screw, and maybe later we'll figure out what we needed that for differently than what I'm going to use it for right now. So what I'm going to do here is actually twist this upwards so that we have a little more room underneath here to work. The orientation of this needs to be basically, this set screw needs to be facing this way, and this threaded hole needs to be facing this way, so such as this, for instance. And then that screw is going to come up obviously through this hole to attach said part to the extruder platform here. There we go. I'm going to leave that loose for now. I'm not going to tighten it down just yet because there's only 1 screw holding it. I imagine we're going to have to align something else up here at some point. So that's step 56. Step 57, for your attention please, find that the motor terminal faces upwards. So we're going to use this other motor. We still have 1 left, so there it is. That's going to be our extruder motor. And let's see here, 40mm motor and 1 M3 by 5. Here's our M3 by 5s. Although this little extra kit here does have M3 by 5s in it, it looks like, so I'm just going to use a couple of those. We're going to put this black piece on here first. So this will mount to the motor. Terminals facing down. This particular piece has to be mounted on here like so. Okay? You can see this indent back here is going to fit over this raised part of the motor, and it's going to go like so in this orientation. So like that, terminals here, this little whatever that thing is there, and we're going to put 1 screw in. Even though there's 2 spots for screws, we're going to put 1 in for now, and these screws are going to be recessed into this part, or at least this one is. Let's get us our properly sized hex head wrench. Ouch! So I'm gonna just put that in there until it's just barely tight. That's good enough. I'll tighten it up later. Still got some play here. I can mess around with it to align it. There is a hole through which, in this black plastic piece, through which the filament's going to be fed. Let me actually get the filament. So here's the filament that came with the kit. And this filament is going to, if I can get the end there, is going to feed through this hole right here. Like so. Okay? Now, what they're also saying is that when you mount this feed gear on here, again, you've got two set screws for this particular gear. This gear needs to go on here like so. Actually, I need to back those set screws out a little bit. They are in a little too far right now. Aye. So there it went. And yes, so you'll see that there's a pretty tight fit in there, but it'll have to get in there. What'll happen is, when this is mounted, this is going to grip. There'll be something over here, I'm supposing, that'll press this against the wheel there, and that's going to feed through the thing there. Anyway, so that's what you need to have happen here. Basically, what needs to happen is this collar that's going to feed the plastic needs to be aligned, centered with this hole right here through which the filament's going to feed. So before you tighten it, that's what you need to do, is line that part up. I'm going to back that up just a hair. It's enough. This gearing covers that hole at the very least, so I'll go ahead and call it good there. I basically got my wrench all the way up against the plastic piece here. And I'll tighten that down. And I'll tighten this one down. And look at that. We've got a filament sucker going on there. Hey, sucker. And we've got no interference when it turns. Step 58 now is to attach another piece. That's because in the instruction manual it's black and here it's white. It's got the bearing on it. That's okay. So yeah, this is basically what's going to... Oh, I get it now. This is... I see what's happening here. So that was an M3x5. We're going to use an M3x16 piece. Now there's an M3x16. Same length of threads. That is the beveled head or whatever. So that's what I'm going to use for that. So here's where your spring goes. There's a little dent there, and there's a little dent down in the black piece there. Go to your home. Screw that thing. Oh yeah, baby. Let's see if it's the right. Yep, that'll work. Now again, you don't want to crank this in here. There has to be a little play. Okay. So yeah, there's quite a bit of movement in there once we've got this down here. I never did tighten that one down back there. Damn it. Alright, so yeah, since I didn't tighten this one down, I'm going to have to redo that. Now, just the tension of that spring, I think, is going to keep this screw tight enough not to back out on me. Alright, we got our motor here with our gear tooth attached and our spring-a-jig here, which is going to make that pulley press into the gear tooth there to feed the filament through the top hole here, down through, and out the bottom hole here into our hothead. Okay, so there's that. And now what we're doing is we're taking our hot end here, and we're going to mount this. It needs to come up through the remaining hole, like so, which is where I need to get that in line. Yes, we have another set screw over here. That's going to keep this thing in place. Yeah, the machining process to thread that hole has, caused some interference. Okay, so now that is all up in. So there we go. Our nozzle and that block that it's mounted in is all the way up through here now. Well, they've said nothing about actually tightening it yet, which makes me think maybe there's a little bit more to do before we tighten it in place yet. So I'm going to keep from tightening that into place just yet. I will, however, get rid of this mess of wires back behind here. What we're going to do next is mount the heat sink. Step 61. We've got our square fan, Sheng Shida. Fan net. I guess that's a fan net. Alright. The heat sink, which is this thing right here. Isolation pillar. M3 by 45s. Those are some long ones. Those come in the kit with the heat sink and all that. So some 45mm cap screws of the M3 size. And 2 M3 filler pieces. How this is going to mount on here. We've got our heat sink. You'll notice our heat sink, not only does it have a hole drilled through the middle here, but it also has 2 holes drilled through one of the sides. So we're going to do this. Now this fan is going to mount in such a way, I believe it's supposed to go this way, because if, well, first of all, this one's already got a built-in shroud, this side does, and second of all, you look around, a lot of times these fans will have a little arrow on them indicating airflow. This one does not. However, I can tell by the curvature of these blades here, this thing's going to spin this way. I can tell by the curvature of these blades that it's going to spin this way and the air is going to go that way. So it needs to be mounted on here like this. I'm going to do it so it comes out the side there, and I can always change it later if I really need to. I like them apples. So, like so. And then, like so. That's what's going on here. Now, these isolation pieces, these are actually going to go down here. Oops. These are actually going to go down here in the heat sink, like so. You'll put your little isolation pieces in there. Then the fan goes in place. Then the fan net, which I dropped there, goes into place. The long screws, we're going to use one of these washers here with the long screw to go through here all the way through the hole to hold this whole mess together. Another washer, like my one-handed approach here to putting washers in place. I hope that you do, but if you don't, I guess I don't really care if you do or not. So yeah, these should get their asses through here. There it goes. Good Lord. I sure do have a lot of stuff going on here. Now, what's going to happen is, this is all going to go together like this. Okay, so that's why this hole's cut here, so that this motor shaft can fit into that hole there. It's going to go together like this. However, it's going to have to go through here first. Okay, so now you can see I've got my fan through the holes there, and you can see I got a little bit poking out on the other side, and that's where we're going to mount the motor. Come in here like so, and that's why we haven't fastened this down yet, because that needs to be pushed down far enough to where it can get under this black part of the housing. So here we go, and we will hope that this threads through there real nice. So far, the hardest part of this build has been this part right here. Okay, I think I've found what's going on here. So this assembly here with the fan and the heat sink, these two screws are kind of cattywampus. They're kind of coming into like at an angle like this, which is making it really hard to screw into the motor. That's because these two holes on the heatsink are not quite drilled evenly. I don't know. So I'm going to have to enlarge one of these holes. The holes that are drilled in there are roughly 9/64. So I'm going to take a 5/32, which is the next drill size up, and actually drill this hole out over here a little bit. Maybe I'll just do both of them. Hell, why not? Do this at your own risk. Do as I say and not as I do. Basically, don't do this. But here, watch how I do it. That's why you don't want to do it like that, because it'll torque it right out of your hand if you're not careful. Like I said, being aluminum, this is not too hard to drill through. There's not a whole lot of power going on there, but there's enough to rip it out of your hand if you're not holding on to it. So now I've got some slightly larger size holes. Keep losing parts because there's about 5,000 parts that are all held together by two screws here. Oh yes, I think we are much more upright-like now, much more parallel, as the scientists would say. Alright, we have to mount this first. And we have to mount the hot end in there before we put all this together, because this set screw is telling us we have to. By the pictures in here, I would have to say that this is actually either put together backwards or the manual has the pictures wrong, because by the pictures, this small hole right here should be facing forward, and this large hole should be facing this. Basically, it should be in this orientation. Now, obviously, we can't do that with this in that order. So what I'm going to have to do here, I think, is it makes more sense too, because then the wires come out this way. Over towards this side here, as opposed to trying to go out the back and, you know, bending the wires all up here. I think I'm going to have to redo that. You see it as I find it. Now what we've done is turn that nozzle and the feed tube around, so that now we can mount this like so and have the wires come out of the other side here, not directly into that back plate. This seems to be what the manual intends to happen, and it makes more sense to me to do that anyway. This piece here, like so, in this orientation with the little set screw right there. Use that screw to put it in there. And then this what I'm going to do, I'm going to decide right here and right now. There is a bit of a chamfer, whatever you want to call it, a little, yeah, you know, a little fanciness there going on that hole where that feed tube comes up. I'm going to put that feed tube in there to where it is level with the top. I'm sorry, with the bottom of that little crater hole there. So basically just like so. That is another small screw. And with that, we can then tighten this the rest of the way up with, of course, the right size freaking wrench. We have our fan assembly. Screws towards the bottom. And you're looking at this from the top down now. We've got our extruder feeder. Extruder, I guess, is just what it is. That's going to go there. Holy macaroni, are you serious? This connector, this white connector here, is bumping up against this black frame and not allowing this motor to move far enough forward. You see that little gap in there between this silver piece and that little silver piece at the bottom. I think what's going to happen here is that I'm going to have to reassemble this dude so that we mount this motor with the connector going up. Not what it says in the manual, but it will make this mount better. So now we are lined up yet again with the motor turned around. So this should now mate up properly. Yay, no more gap. Like so. You can see it's all nice and flush here now. This is how it's supposed to be. But you know what? I'm going to leave the wires on the fan on top so that they can come over here and join the wires from the motor and go wherever they need to go. These go through the holes, and these should just very ever so nicely thread right in. This should not be moving around that much, and these things are cranked down pretty good. Whether that's because they're bottomed out, well, the next thing I'm going to do is shorten these screws. That's just, I'm going to do it. So our hot end here has been kind of a hot mess, if you want to put it that way. And I've had to make several mods to get it to work like I want it to work. Now, whether or not these are necessary for this to print any better, I guess I don't know yet, but the way it was going together, I wasn't very happy with. So I made some mods off camera here, and let's go through what all I have done. So far, this being our nozzle and our feed tube, I did have to flip this around because it was mounted in such a way that it was the reverse. This was down here and this was up here. Next, this being the block that goes up here that the extruder comes into, and then the set screw gets set. When that set screw is tightened down, this is also the face right here to which this heatsink attaches. And that set screw was not being set in far enough for that to be a solid mount for the heatsink. So what I also did was file the head of that set screw down a little bit. Okay, basically I stuck the extruder, or I'm sorry, I stuck the hot end in there, tightened it down, and then filed it to where it was level with this entire surface. I had to mod the heat sink in a couple of different ways. First of all, I drilled these two holes out larger. Now, speaking of the long screws, one of the things I did was trim these. These are 45 millimeters out of the box. I trimmed about 3 millimeters off of these, so now they're 42 millimeters. What was happening when I put it together was that this screw, being as long as it was, came all the way through all that stuff and hit the screw hole it was supposed to hit, but then would bottom out on the screw hole in the motor mount and wouldn't allow me to tighten it down far enough. So I trimmed about 3 millimeters off of that. The other thing I did was mount this backwards. If you remember, the instructions said to have the connector face down so that they would hang off of the back of the bracket here. However, that does not allow this motor to move far enough this way to mate up flush with everything that needs to come over here. So I changed it to where the connector is upwards. That way there is no interference with that motor connector and this bracket. What did I say? I modded the heatsink here. Also, obviously you saw this great big divot back here. So what's going on there is that this heatsink also, in addition to having to mount flush with this piece, like so, it has to mount flush with this motor face and all the little parts that are tacked onto it, like so. Now, one of the things there was a problem with on the other side here is the screw that holds that pulley into place. That screw sticks out, it's not flush, it was causing me problems. So I started with the drill bit and I kind of drilled a great big divot in the heatsink there. And then I got the Dremel tool out and kind of wallered it out, I guess you could say. At least to the point to where now, when this is all together, that will not interfere with this heatsink being square on this block back here. What else? I think the last thing I did was actually to trim these stupid little plastic pieces. The plastic pieces that go into the heatsink mounting holes here, those are supposed to go in just like that. Since these are only being mounted, this fan's only being mounted with 2 screws in the bottom here, that left the top here to be floppy, and that's not okay with me, I guess. So I shortened those ever so slightly. I only had to shave a little bit off of there with a utility knife. So that when I tighten them down, it should be that this fan is flush with this heatsink. That's not going to cause a problem with the fan rotation. You can see there's no interference here. So I hollowed that out, and I've done some filing here and there to make sure all the mating surfaces are flat. You can see there with the set screw for the feed nozzle, feed tube, was hitting the heatsink. So I have filed everything flat. I just took a little a rat tail file I have here and went over the surface of everything that was going to mate together, just to make sure there were no burrs or anything like that causing problems any more than they already have. And again, this has been by far the most problem I've had with this kit so far. Everything has gone together really smoothly until now. So, you, the viewer, are with me, the Nate, on this journey together. Alright, so let's start putting this thing together again and see if we can get anywhere. Oh, baby. That is on there tight now. And that little springamabobber still has room to springamabob. So now we've got our fan mounted. Got our screws in place. What was I going to point out? Oh yeah, this springy thingy up here still has room to spring, even though this
Well, that's it for this episode on Nate's Garage and Bakery. Did you get this far? Did you like what you saw? Go ahead on and click that subscribe button for future videos. Hell, click the like button while you're at it. Leave a comment if you got questions. I'll try to answer. Later.